Welcome back as we start our exploration of the endocrine system. And so the endocrine system is very much related to the nervous system, and yet it's quite distinct from it. Both systems are regulatory. In other words, these are the two systems which are keeping us in that bliss known as homeostasis. They both are going to work through chemical signals, and they both work through that process of negative feedback. So you've already learned a lot about the nervous system. So let's talk about what is different between the two. In the nervous system, you learned that there was a sensory receptor, and from there we had afferent information that went to the central nervous system where it was all integrated, and then we had some type of response that came out and was carried out by the effectors. And the way messages were transferred were through chemicals known as neurotransmitters across synapses. And this was a very quick, rapid communication and very quick passing of information all the way from the receptor to the response. But the responses were very short-lived. We are talking seconds at most. In contrast to this, the endocrine system is going to be called into duty based on a stimulus or a message, which is often the blood concentration of something. And as a result of this, it will secrete a chemical, but we're not going to call it a neurotransmitter, we're going to call it a hormone because it travels in the blood. So it's a slow method of communication and has a prolonged response, usually minutes, days, and sometimes even weeks for the response. So to refresh your memory, crine means to secrete, and when we have exocrine secretions, which we'll be learning about the digestive, the respiratory, the urinary, reproductive systems, there the cells secrete a substance which is going to go onto a surface, whether it's an external surface like the skin or an internal surface. And it can travel by a duct to reach the surface. In contrast, endocrine secretions are going to go into the bloodstream. So, in summary, endocrine system is going to use chemical messengers called hormones in the blood. They're going to be binding to their specific cell receptors, and there's going to be a lag period from when the stimulus occurred to secrete these hormones to when there is an effect, a result of that hormone being secreted. Which brings us to the question, what then is a hormone? Well, it's something that's going to travel to act in the endocrine system long distance. And what hormones are going to do is they're going to cause signaling between the cell that secreted them and the cell that's going to have an effect. So the effects are only going to be on cells that have a specific receptor for that hormone, that one specific hormone. And this cell is known as the target cell. So when we talk about cell signaling, the endocrine type of cell signaling, as I've said several times right now, is the hormone is secreted into the blood by the endocrine cell tissue gland, travels in the blood vessel to a distant target cell where it's going to bind to its receptor and cause some type of effect in that distant target cell. There are other types of cell signaling, some of which use hormones, and the first type is autocrine signaling, where basically the cell that is secreting the substance is the same cell that has receptors for that substance. So the effect is on the secreting cell itself. And an example of this is when the smooth muscle releases prostaglandins, it causes that smooth muscle to contract, and this is what causes uterine cramps during ladies' menstrual cycles. And so it could be blocked with something that blocks prostaglandin release. Between these two, in other words, the same cell and the distant cell, there's nearby cells, and this is called paracrine secretion. And this is really common, for instance, in the digestive system, where it's going to act locally, but not on itself, but on its neighbor cells. So it's going to be a different cell type. We've seen examples of this type of cell signaling before when we had mast cells releasing histamine, and then the histamine acted on the nearby blood vessels, causing vasodilation. All right, so that's it for the introduction, and I will see you soon as we continue to understand what's happening with the endocrine system.